Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Late Winner Show. We are gathered here today to talk about the Belgium national team and their performances in the Euro 2020, which was just concluded 10 days ago. What is the golden generation really over, and what can we really expect from them in the next year's World Cup? I have actually a very special guest, Scott, who manages the Belgium Football Podcast on. So Scott, welcome to the Late Winner Show.
Hi, Rishab. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah. Do you want to just tell me a little bit about your podcast as well?
Yeah, so I'm part of the three-man team behind the Belgian Football Podcast, or as some people like to call it, the BFP. We've got a weekly pod which covers all the latest action in Belgian football. And every so often we throw in extra special episodes as well, where we invite on guests and do kind of deep dives into specific topics on Belgian football. So we might do a special on a specific team. Last season we had a great guest in Antoine Gobin, who's one of the chief executives of one of the top flight clubs. Unfortunately, that club got relegated, but it was a great episode that and he came on to kind of talk about what was happening at the club, because at the time the club had new owners as well. So we cover pretty much everything in the English language in Belgian football. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that introduction. But let's get started onto talking about the Belgium team. I think Belgium were probably one of the favorites to win the tournament in Euros, and they obviously kind of. I would not say they disappointed me, but some of the performances that I saw against even let's say Portugal, it really didn't show me enough that and tell me that they were going to be they are going to be the favorites to win the tournament. And as soon as they won the match, and that their next opponent was Italy, I think every one of us were probably saying that it's probably going to be Italy who's going to win. So. But what did you make of Belgium's performances in the Euros which just concluded? And given that all the big players they did not perform to the level that we wanted them to, and even talking about specifically about like even Romelu Lukaku, who has obviously developed into this new beast again when he now plays for Inter Milan again under Conte. He performs in the international stages, in the group stages, where he scored a couple of goals, and everyone will be like, okay, this is the tournament that he will perform. But when it comes to the latter stages of the tournament, when it comes to the big moments, he's not able to really perform. So what do you have to say about Belgium's performances, and specifically some players on the Belgium team?
Well, I think the performances across the tournament generally were kind of quite good, actually. Going into the tournament, the big worry for the Red Devils was actually would the defence stand up? The defence actually is very, very experienced. I mean, you've got players in there like Toby Alderweireld, Diedrich Bayata, Jason Denayer, Thomas Vermaelen, Jan Vertonghen, players like that, and they've all got tremendous experience, but they're all kind of the wrong side of 30, if you like. And when you get to an international tournament, and particularly the knockout stages of tournaments like that, that's when players really get tested. And there was a slight worry going into the tournament: would that defence stand up to the pressure of a pacey, mobile attacking line when it got to the knockout stage? And the answer is, for the most part, they did. Yes, they had a very ropey game against Denmark. The first half against Denmark in the group was pretty poor, and those worries that I'm talking about did start to become kind of reality, but they managed to kind of turn it around because they were able to bring out their big guns, of course. I think the performances, as I was saying, on the whole, generally were quite good. I think now that the tournament's over and there's been a chance to do a proper kind of post-mortem on it, I think the thing that really let Belgium down in the end ultimately was the fact that their top players weren't 100% fit. And that's the real reason why they weren't quite able to maybe perform at the level that they could have, and that we would have certainly hoped. I mean, Eden Hazard struggling with an injury, really. Kevin De Bruyne again Another injury, kind of playing through his injury as well. And Axel Witsel as well, another really important member of the squad. Although he was able to start games and actually play quite well when he did, again, he wasn't quite 100% fit. So my view certainly is that was a huge factor in them not getting beyond the quarterfinals. And to get to the quarterfinals was actually quite good when you consider that. The game against the Italians, I felt at times Italy were almost unplayable in that game. They were really, really very good. And there was very little, I think, that the Red Devils could have done, even with some minor tactical tweaking, to make much of a difference in that game. It was just kind of one of those nights where, you were playing a team that were really playing very well, and the top players weren't 100% fit. But I don't think they can be too disappointed with the tournament on the whole, because when you bear that in mind, to get to the quarterfinals is pretty decent on the whole. It's only disappointing when you bear it in context with the bigger picture, and that is a side that are number one in the world, who are expected to go to, and in all honesty, I said before the tournament that I felt that the semi-finals was probably the minimum to be considered a successful tournament. But what we didn't know at the time was that, of course, that the injuries were going to be quite as much of an impediment as ultimately they were, really.
So, you brought up a very good point, and I was coming to it. When you talk about the Belgium team, who is the number one in the world for about, I think about 2 years now, or 2 or 3 years now. So when you talk about getting a number one side coming into a tournament and still not being favorite, and still not, and you're saying, like, coming into the tournament, you see, like, okay, even if we get to the semifinals, probably it's still a decent tournament, or it's probably a successful tournament. Even you look back to 2018 World Cup, when they defeated Brazil, and they lost against France in the semifinals. They came back home, and all these gatherings were there. Well, I think where the royal family or someone, like, of Belgium, they invited them, and like the entire crowd was there. So I remember those pictures and I remember those scenes. But you still see, like, you coming into a tournament who is the number one side in the world, and still saying that a semi-final would still be a successful tournament. But given if that was attached to any other side in the world, that would probably not be the case. Like, they would be like, number one side, it's France or Brazil, like, you have to win the tournament. Like, that's the least that they expect from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, this, because I agree with everything you say there. The one thing I was saying to a lot of people in the run-up to the tournament was, the one thing that nobody can really influence or control is that sort of 4-week period during an active tournament. You work for a number of years up to this point, and if you get some injuries right on the cusp of that, or in the months leading up to it, that mean that certain players aren't quite at the level you would want them to be at going into that, then that can undo all that work. So that's the really difficult thing about tournament football. Winning tournaments, even if you're expected to win them, is actually very difficult, and it's because of that. It's because of that unpredictable factor that the best coaches and players in the world can't even account for. So really, it's, in a way, it's about how do you manage those factors so that maybe some of those things don't derail you. I had a feeling that they wouldn't win it, because I was aware that some of the players weren't quite at the level that we would have wanted them to be at. But I did expect them to go quite far, and I ultimately wasn't too disappointed, because when you bear in mind what side of the draw they were in as well, that would have made it much harder. So if they had gone all the way, then they would definitely have done it the hard way, because they were in the side of the draw that was going to make it very, very difficult. And I said to somebody that I know quite well before the tournament, I had a feeling that the Italians were going to do quite well. I didn't say they would win it, but I thought they would go very, very far. And I just had a feeling that it was a good moment for them, because of their previous 2 years and failing to qualify for the last World Cup. There was a feeling that they were onto something there. I think the national team at the moment, as far as the Red Devils are concerned, they're in a very good place. The media were kind of a little bit harsh, I felt, because of the expectations. But when you bear in mind everything that I've mentioned, and the fact as well that the generation coming up behind this one, it's worth mentioning, is extremely good, then the future is really, really very bright for Belgian football.
So, and now you were talking about the future. Given what they have achieved in the last 7 years, and we talk about this golden generation, after 4 major tournaments, they have had 2 World Cups, 2 European Championships, and history is now likely to record that the peak of Belgium's golden generation has failed to deliver any silverware, right? For some, the time has already come and gone. Like, Vincent Kompany is, I think, now a manager at Anderlecht, and Dembele, Fellaini are playing in China. For others, like, Euro 2020 was probably the end. I guess, like, Vermaelen's probably now is playing in Japan, I guess. Yeah, he's playing in Japan.
Yeah.
He did give one last, outstanding performance against Portugal. He is obviously not probably in the picture for the 2022 World Cup. I'm guessing. Vertonghen and Mertens are both are 34. They probably will join him as well. And Toby Alderweireld and Axel Witsel, you mentioned, like, both 32, may have probably their own, deliberations. For others who will count as the golden generation would be Courtois, De Bruyne, Eden Hazard, and Lukaku. We probably expect them to give one more try at the 2022 World Cup. But do you think that's the last chance that the golden generation has, or do we even need to call this generation the golden generation, given that we had in the Belgium team these 4 or 5 top star players in the team? Do we need to give them the title of their golden generation, or is it just that because Belgium were never considered as that big horse or big team in the major tournaments or in the international tournaments, do we need to give them the title of that golden generation? And what do you feel for that next year World Cup? Anyone that's coming up within that Belgium team, who is coming up, and what do you think are the realistic chances at the next year's World Cup?
I think the phrase "the golden generation" is a bit of a tricky one, because that's something that's it's a bit of a lead weight around them, really, and it's just something you have to deal with, actually, when you have that many good players in your squad. I think there was an acceptance in Belgium generally that this was probably the last chance for the core of this squad to win something. People were kind of quite relaxed about that, and there's a nice balance in the squad, actually, between those that are experienced and some of the younger players. And there was a feeling that probably now was going to be the moment if it was going to happen. Now that it hasn't happened, I know that the Belgian FA don't feel too despondent about it, in all honesty. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, because of what I mentioned earlier, because there's so much good talent coming through now. And also there is the Nations League semi-final against France coming up in October, which is a big game. So that's an opportunity to win something for the next World Cup. So when you look at it like that in terms of the bigger picture, then I think they're looking at it the right way. I mean, I made a note earlier of some of the names that are kind of coming through and will be coming through over the next probably 2 or 4 years. So some of these names might not feature at the next World Cup, but are certainly going to feature longer term now for the Red Devils. You've got players like Martin van der Voort, the Genk goalkeeper, defenders, Zeno van Housden, who's just gone to Genoa, Hans Delqua at Anderlecht, another defender, Arthur Tiati at Oostende, defender again, Jelle Bataille, defender at Antwerp, Sambi Lokonga, who's just got his big move from Anderlecht to Arsenal. He's going to become a regular starter, and certainly he'll feature at the next World Cup. I'm certain of that. And then you've got other players as well, like Charles de Ketelaar at Club Brugge, Yari Verscharen, another one at Anderlecht, and of course Jeremy Doku, who made an impression, as we were certainly would at this tournament as well. So I think the future longer term is very bright, and I think that's why those in the footballing community are not too despondent about not being able to go all the way. They just recognise it's just a bit of bad luck, as I was saying to people, to be honest.
And then what do you think? Like, are you realistic? Like, what is Belgium's realistic chances at the 2022 World Cup? Do you think that they still have that one more chance to go and bid for that elusive, bring some silverware?
It's very difficult to know, actually, because they will be bringing some new players through. So there's going to be some adjustments, but the adjustments will be minor. So the actual system that Roberta Martinez has in place, I would imagine, will stay the same. It's really a case of changing the personnel, really. and re-energising that system a little bit, in my view anyway. I think the expectation is they should be going far in that tournament. I mean, winning it is very difficult to know. We won't get a clearer picture of that, I think, until maybe 6 months or so outside of the tournament, to be honest. I think the likelihood of Belgium staying number one in the world until then is actually quite good, because they're not likely to be playing anybody between now and that tournament in Dubai that's likely to change the rankings. So not that much will change, I think, other than some new faces coming into the squad. And I think Roberta Martinez will be very careful about who he picks, because the danger here is you bring in too many new players quickly, and that upsets the balance.
Yeah.
And of course, the system they have in place works very well and has been for a while. And the academy system in Belgium and the youth systems generally are working very, very effectively, which is why so many good players are coming through. So it's really kind of small tweaks. And some of it will be to do with what individual players kind of want to retire as well. Which is obviously a personal thing as well. So we will probably, I mean, you're right, in Thomas Vermaalen's a good example. He's a player who I wouldn't expect to see in Dubai, because by then he'll be 37, just touching 38. So there's an outside possibility he might make the squad because of his experience, but I wouldn't expect him to kind of start come then. And there might be another 2 or 3 other players who do decide to kind of call it a day before then. But the good thing is they've got time on their side to think about that and to kind of pinpoint these changes more effectively, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I have different thoughts on it, like, because it's not really 2 years away. It's literally just like after the tournament ends, it's like 16, 17 months away. So it's or 15 months away. So I still really feel like, the likes of Vermaelen and Alderweireld and even Bertens, who are in the later stages of their career, I still feel like they, just because of the disappointment that they had in this tournament, they would want to give that one more shot, because this probably will be their last. Like I'm pretty sure they won't play 2024 Euros. That's definitely there. So
yeah, I mean,
even yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think you're absolutely right. I think the one thing we don't know at the moment is which members of the kind of current core squad might call it a day over the next year. I think the fact there is 2 tournaments kind of coming up pretty quickly, like you say, my instincts tell me that I think most of this squad are going to stay together. I think we might only see maybe only 2 or 3 coming in for the next World Cup, which is, a minimal change. And I can understand that, because it's like I was saying, you don't really want to upset the balance too much. And I would expect there to be players like, I think Sambi Lokonga is probably going to be one of those. And I think Jeremy Doku is going to slot in and be a regular starter in all likelihood as well. So the changes are much more likely to be small, I think, than big, really. And again, it's that lottery thing of, who they're going to get in their group in the draw and what side of the draw they're going to be on, because that'll have a huge say on, of course, how far they can get to.
I think you mentioned pretty good on that, Jeremy Doku and Lokonga. So I think Jeremy Doku is playing in Stade Rennes, I guess, right? That's where he's playing. Yeah. So he's playing there, and like Lokonga already has his big move to Arsenal, so probably we'll see more of him in that competitive league. So we'll see what he can bring, and maybe in the next year or so he becomes that center back where that Belgium definitely needs for the next year World Cup. One last question that I wanted to touch on is about Roberta Martinez. So he signed for the Belgian national team in 2016, and his contract runs until next year's World Cup. But there have been suspicions that he's been there for more than 5 years now, and he wants to go back to that club football managing level. So is there anything that you know about, like, if he's actually not going to stay, or if he's going to hand over his stuff to some other manager, or is he on track to meet that 2022 World Cup, and he's still in the plans to manage the team in Qatar?
I think there's been speculation about this for kind of quite a long time now. I think he kind of cleared that up after the tournament. Initially, there was a question mark about whether he would want to continue and also whether he should continue. He came out a few days later and said that he intended to continue and see out his contract to Dubai, which didn't surprise me. I was quite glad about it because I think that's the right decision, actually, for the national side. I think the work that's going on there is still the right work. So although the tournament didn't end the way that a lot of people would have hoped it would have, I think it wasn't too bad in context. I know he's very happy in Belgium. His family are happy there. He has a good relationship with the staff. He's a very good communicator. People like Roberto for the most part anyway. And the players, he has a good relationship with that squad. So I think changing it would have been really quite risky, especially with two tournaments kind of coming up in the not too distant future as well. There's a very settled system and way of working there that has worked, and there's no reason why it shouldn't continue to work yet. So I would certainly expect him to be there and see out the World Cup in Dubai. After that, I think, all bets are off, and whether it's a good or a bad tournament for Belgium, I would expect maybe a change at that point. But there's a lot of good work going on behind the scenes, where Roberto's laying the kind of groundwork for the next generation and for the next 5 to 10 years of talent in Belgian football. And he's been working very hard to kind of leave a legacy. That a new coach can come in whenever that is and carry on that kind of good work without having to completely change the system. So that stability is very important, I think. And sometimes, when teams go out of tournaments, maybe unexpectedly early, there tends to be a wee bit of hysteria, both in the media and amongst fans sometimes, because they look for somebody to blame, and often that's the coach, and it's not always the right call to make. So I think him staying on is the right decision. I think we'll probably see the benefits of that over the next 18 months as well.
Oh, okay. I think that's really good. That's really good insight on Belgium national team, and thank you for providing your thoughts on what you think on next year's chances at the World Cup. What did you think about the Euros that recently concluded? I think we can close out at that, but I really hope Belgium do well at the World Cup. I think they have the superstars that they need. I think it's just another year and a half, and probably maybe even Lukaku getting more time. I would have really liked if Conte had stayed at Inter, because I think he was doing something really special at Inter, and the way I saw Lukaku develop under him was like really, really good to see. Even if Hazard can find his form and not getting injured every 2 months, probably he's probably going to be their most influential player come 2022 World Cup. So thank you for providing your thoughts on that. I think we'll conclude our podcast on that. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, The Late Winner Show. Also go and check out the Belgium Football Podcast. I think they provide really good knowledge on the Belgium Pro Leagues and on the Belgium national team. So definitely do subscribe to their channels, and we'll leave the links in the description below. Also follow us on Twitter and the Instagram channels that we have for more new content that's going to come up. We're going to post there's loads of new content coming up in the future. So stay tuned for that. I really like to thank again Scott for joining in from the Belgium Football Podcast, and hopefully we can collaborate in the future again on Belgium, or even when we decide to cover the Belgium leagues.
Pleasure. Cheers, Rishab.
Yeah, thank you.